We're going to show you how to make simple blackout curtains. Blackout curtains are a great way to block the light that comes through your decorative fabric. Generally, they're mounted on a second curtain rod behind the decorative material. In this first chapter, we'll be going over our calculations and then measuring and cutting out our material. Here are the calculations for our curtain width and height. Feel free to pause here if you need to study them a little bit more. For our space, we'll be making 4 individual curtains. Typically, you would only make 2. 2 of our curtain panels will be hidden behind our decorative fabric, so we'll only be drawing 2.
This is our blackout drapery lining, and it does have a right and wrong side. The right side, or the outside, is the side that is woven, and the wrong side, or inside, is the side that is soft and a little bit fuzzy feeling. So now I'm going to use my T-square to mark for my width. And my window is, I measured my window, it's 42 inches. And I need to add an inch for hem allowances on each side, so I need 2 extra inches, so 43, 44. And I've also noticed that, I've already made one of these, and I've also noticed that it seems to actually get a little bit smaller. So I'm actually going to go to 44 and an eighth. Right there. And I'll just mark it over here so you can see it, right there. And then I'm going to mark it a bunch of other spots down its length, so I can strike a line for my height. 44 and an eighth. Okay, so I'm going to line up my straight edge with those marks I placed on the fabric, so I can strike a line for the height. Line up there, and I also want to line it up here at the bottom so that it's on, I have it on 65 inches, because I'm going to have to add more for my height, because I need 90, I think it's 95 inches or 94 and a half inches. So now I'll just check to make sure it's all lined up. Looks good. And I will just mark this all the way down to the bottom. Just like that. And then I'm going to come up here, and I put it on 65 inches. Oops, it looks like it came away a little bit. I'm going to mark here. This will be in my hem, so it doesn't matter. And then I'm going to put a 65 right here in the excess fabric, so I know that it's 65 inches. And then I'll pull the fabric down, and then I'll know how much to add from there. Okay, so now I'm going to add 29 and a half plus another 1/8 inch, just like I did for for shrinkage, because it's going to shrink a little when I sew, not too much. So I'll just strike a line down here, all the way across. Strike my line over, and then I'll strike a line across using the T-square. Okay, line it up with this edge, nice and square. Line it up over there, and then strike the line straight across, just like that. And then we'll cut it out with a pair of scissors. If you don't have a T-square, what you can do is you can create your rectangle and then measure from corner to corner with like a soft tape measure or tape measure, and make sure that the measurements are the exact same to know that your piece is squared. So we're just going to use a pair of scissors to cut out our blackout material, and we'll just cut on that line all the way across and cut the entire shade out, or curtain out, sorry.
In this chapter, we'll show you an example of how you would seam panels together for a wider curtain. So here I have 2 pieces of our blackout material, and this is just a sample of what you would do if you want to sew 2 panels together to make a wider curtain. I'm going to take inside surfaces. This is not what you normally do, but this is what I'm doing to get the seam on the outside facing the window. So inside surfaces, this is the fuzzy side, this is the fuzzy side, would face one another. Line up these edges, and I'm going to sew down these edges, and I'll take this to the machine. I have my magnetic sewing guide on at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this is just a sample of what you would do for to sew 2 panels together to make a wider curtain. And I'm going to do a little bit of reversing here at the beginning. Just sew down these panels, lining up the edges as I go. Okay, I'm going to pull this out, cut my trailers, and then I'm going to take this, I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to splay my seam allowance
one way or the other, and I'm just going to crease it down.
Okay, my seam allowance is this direction. I can feel it through the fabric, and I want to make sure this is splayed apart. I'll line the outside edge of my foot up against this previous stitch, and I will do a little reversing here because this is where my hem will be at the top or the bottom of my curtain. And then I will just sew down the length of this panel, splaying the fabric out both directions, making sure I'm still sewing through that seam allowance. Very easy, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're finished. Here's what it looks like when it's done. This would be the surface that faces inside towards your room, and this would be the surface that faces towards the window. And you could reduce your seam allowance. We did a 1/2 inch, but you could reduce this down to make this seam even smaller, but you really won't be able to see this through the window easily, so it doesn't really matter.
In this next chapter, we'll be hemming the bottom edge and the sides of our curtain. This is the outside surface, so the woven side, and I'm going to mark 1 inch up from here, and then 1.5 inches for my 1/2 inch double hem. Okay, we've marked our first line at 1 inch, and now I'm going to mark another line at 1.5 inches, which is a 1/2 inch up from our previous line, so you actually can just line it up at the 1/2 inch mark. Strike a line all the way across. Okay, and you want to be careful when you're striking these lines because I've tested many pencils on this. They do not come off, so if you do end up getting pencil in the wrong spot, it's going to be there. Now we're going to do up the height, and we're going to do the exact same thing. Mark at 1 inch, and then we'll go up and mark at 1.5 inches as well, all the way down the length on both sides. So I'm going to do this on this side, and I'm going to do it on that side, and then I'll show you what's next. Okay, now I'm down here at the bottom edge again, and that's where I'm going to start. There's a 1/4 inch basting tape for canvas and upholstery, and I'm going to place basting tape across this bottom edge, make sure it's down well, then break the end, peel off the transfer paper, revealing the glue, and I'm going to baste to my first line, just like that, all the way across. And I actually think it's easier to baste a little bit ahead of where you're going to baste and then come back and baste this down. And what that does is it stops it from wrinkling as I go across, so I'm not pulling the fabric one direction. So if I actually just kept basting, oftentimes I'll be off on the opposite end. Okay, now that we've put basting tape there, peeled up the transfer paper, I'm going to start here in the middle for this one. And I'm just going to baste both directions right on that line. And now I'm going to baste both of the ends, or the long edges, in the same manner. And I'll just peel this up to show you real fast, and then I'll just do the rest without showing you. All you're going to do is end up folding this in on top of itself once, just like that, and then twice, and then we'll end up sewing around this inside edge. Okay, so I've finished my hems. I did the bottom first, then the 2 long sides. I have not done anything at the top. And I've put my T-square on here so that I can check to make sure it's 42 inches. If it wasn't 42 inches, I can make adjustments just by peeling up this hem and basting it again. Okay, and now we're going to take it to the machine and sew.
Coming up, we'll be sewing those hems.
So I've set up a table behind in front of my machine, and that's because this material gets super dirty if it hits the floor, and also this just makes it easier overall. So I'll get it all positioned up here. I'll just roll it up a little bit so it stays on the table. So I'm using a dual duty all-purpose sewing thread. So it's rather light for lightweight materials. And I'm using a size 10 needle. And I have a narrow foot set on here. And what that does is it allows me to not put as many track marks on the top of the material. And also it's just a little easier to sew close to this edge. I've released a lot of tension. You don't need much tension when you're sewing with light fabrics and threads. And I'm just gonna sew along this edge using that outside edge of the center foot as my guide. So just line the outside edge of this foot up with the edge of this. Do some reversing here at the beginning. And then I'm just going to sew down the length of this panel. And whenever you feel like you need to stop and make adjustments, make sure you bury your needle. And just pull your fabric forward. Continue to sew. And you can use a magnetic sewing guide for this. It can be helpful. So just put it in position so it's right up against the material. And I can just use that as a guide. And it does make it a little easier.
Okay, and it can be a little helpful to put your hand back
Here. I'm not really pulling the fabric. I'm just making sure it stays straight while I feed it in there. And I'm just going to sew all the way down this side, around the bottom, and back up to the top. And I will show you one of these corners when we get to the bottom edge down here. Okay, we're coming up to this corner here. And I cleaned the floor behind the machine really well so that I didn't have to worry about it falling back there. And I'm just going to sew up to this corner and just sew a 1/2 inch into this turn and make the turn. And I will use, oh, it doesn't look like I'm going to have to, but I would use the reverse lever if I needed to make an adjustment, but I definitely don't. Bury my needle, coming up a little bit, lift the foot, rotate the fabric, and then I'll sew down this side. Or this is the bottom, actually. Sew across, turn the next corner, sew back up to the top, do some reversing, and then we'll show you how to finish the top edge.
In this final chapter, we'll be creating our sleeve for the curtain rod.
Now we're here at the top edge, and we're going to put a mark or a line at 1 inch all the way across. And this is just for a 1/2 inch hem, so that there's no exposed fabric. Basting tape across this edge. Peel off the transfer paper and fold to that mark. And then we're going to take this back to a larger table just so we can check to make sure that our length is proper, because you can make adjustments to this hem or this hem to make it so that the pocket, when you make the pocket, it's exactly our 90-inch finished length.
Now we're over at the large loft table measuring the length of our curtain after that 1/2 inch hem, and it's 93 inches, which is what we expected. We're going to measure down 6 inches from that top edge of our curtain, then apply basting tape along that top edge and fold it down and create our sleeve. If you come up short of your desired sleeve finish size, you can always adjust that hem and make it a little smaller or a little bigger. I measured it one more time to make sure that it hit our desired finish size, which is 90 inches, and it does.
Okay, now we're going to sew this pocket down. Same method we used for sewing our hem down. I'm going to start over here at this outside edge. Do some reversing right here. I'm using the outside edge of that foot as my guide. And then I'll just sew across this. And I do want to stay as accurate as I can because this is going to be seen on the outside. So whenever you need to make adjustments to your fabric, stop, bury the needle, make your adjustments, and then continue sewing.
Remember to do some reversing when you reach the other end. Our blackout curtains are now complete and they look great. Check out the full list of materials and tools in the description below. And be sure to subscribe and help us reach our goal of 500,000 subscribers. From all of us here at Sailrite, I'm Seth Grant. Thanks for watching.